Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm going to be talking about my expanded top 10 of 2022. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check all those out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music weekly playlist that we put together, and also the Patreon page. So make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So if you watch this past Sunday's video, Ian and I kind of laid out our top 3 of 2022, and I thought 2022 was an incredible year for new music. It was really kind of hard for me to kind of narrow it down to just 3 albums. So I figured today I'd do my top 10. And actually, I've got a bunch of honorable mentions also. But make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what some of your favorite albums of the year are. Like I said, I got 20 on my list. I'm going to go through my top 10. And I got a bunch of honorable mentions. Taylor Swift, Midnights. I know a lot of people like to hate on Taylor Swift, but Midnights was a pretty good album. I don't think it's one of her best albums, but I thought it was really good. Dropkick Murphys, This Machine Still Kills Fascists, an incredible album where they kind of went back. And it's an acoustic Dropkick Murphys album where they used Woody Guthrie's lyrics for the album. That was a really great album. The Zealot Gene by Jethro Tull. I'm a big Jethro Tull fan. I think it's probably Jethro Tull's best album since 1995. Hated the album cover, but it was a good album. Beach Bunny, Emotional Creature. I knew nothing about this band. I happened to be in a record store earlier this year when the album came out, and they were playing in the store, and I had to buy it. I thought it was a fantastic album. Flogging Molly, Anthem, another great album. Flogging Molly, they're one of those bands I don't think has made a bad album, but I really liked Anthem. I thought it was a great album. An album that I had, midway through the year, I did my top 5, up to that point. The Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar was on that list. I thought it was a great album. It didn't end up being in my top 10 for the year, but I thought it was a really good rap album. Probably one of the better rap albums of the year. Unlimited Love by Red Hot Chili Peppers. I thought was I thought it was a really good album. I think it's better than some of the stuff that they've done over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, but it didn't quite make my top 10. Avril Lavigne, Love Sucks was an album that I talked about earlier in the year. Beginning of the year, Ian and I always do this video where we kind of talk about our most anticipated albums for the year. Love Sucks was on that list. It was a really good album. Didn't make my top 10, but it was worth mentioning. Arcade Fire, I think was a fantastic album that a lot of people kind of slept on. It's definitely worth kind of going back and checking that out if you're unfamiliar with Arcade Fire. And then Black Bear in Loving Memory. Black Bear, I think, is one of those artists kind of gaining momentum over the last year or two. I've got it on CD. I can't wait for this to come out on vinyl. It's such a great album that, probably not a lot of people out there are all that familiar with. It's definitely one of those albums where it's kind of rap, kind of rock, kind of punk rock. It's this mixture of genres, which I really like it. I thought it was a really fantastic album, but those are my 10 honorable mentions, and all 10 of those could have easily ended up in my top 10. It was just that kind of a year, just a great year for music overall, I think. So starting at number 10 on the list is another one of those albums I talked about in my mid-year review, and that is Earthling by Eddie Vedder. I'm a big Pearl Jam fan, have been for a long time. I've been Eddie's solo stuff has been mostly missed for me, even though he has done some good tracks. Earthling is a lot more reminiscent of what he's done with Pearl Jam. Definitely a lot more rock than some of the other stuff that he's done. But it's an album that, when it first came out, I had to give it a couple of listens to before I really kind of grabbed onto it. But ever since then, it's been a fantastic album. This was released back February 11th. So I've been listening to this thing all year long. And I'd probably say it's definitely in my top 20 probably most played albums this year. And number 9 is an album that was also released back in February. It was actually a week before. This one was released February 4th. It's an album that I didn't have a lot of expectations for, but I was really happy with it when I finally did pick it up. But that's Requiem by Korn. It was probably midsummer by the time I finally picked up a copy of this and finally gave it a listen to, and was really impressed with it. I'd probably say the first 2 or 3 Korn albums were hands down my favorite. After that, they had some good stuff off and on, but they never had, at least in my opinion, a really complete album. Requiem is definitely kind of up there with their first couple of albums. Absolutely fantastic from beginning to end, and one that I can listen to over and over again. So at number 8 is an album that I really kind of have to give my wife credit for introducing me to it. This was released back July 15th, but it probably was beginning, maybe middle part of August when she picked it up on CD. We listened to it on the way back from the record store, and I was so impressed with it, I had to pick it up. I actually ordered the record that night. I think it's the Walmart exclusive that I got. But that album is Special by Lizzo, and this is something I would generally not really listen to. I'm not a huge fan of her previous work, but I was really, really impressed with this album from beginning to end. It's just a fun, entertaining album. And like I said, it was one that instantly I was kind of hooked on. So at number 7, it's actually 2 albums. These are 2 albums that Ian and I talked about at the very beginning of the year when we did our most anticipated albums for 2022. I was kind of cautiously optimistic on both these, and I think both these albums really kind of lived up to all the hype that they were getting. Of course, those albums, Fear of the Dawn and Entering Heaven Alive, both of the albums by Jack White that came out this year. Fear of the Dawn, I think, was the first one. That one came out back April 8th. Entering Heaven Alive came out July 22nd. They're a little bit kind of different style-wise from each other, but they're both fantastic albums. I don't remember what the name of Jack's previous solo album was, but I was not a fan of it. I think it was probably, at least in my opinion, the worst thing that Jack has done in his solo career or anything he's done with the White Stripes. So that's why I was kind of cautiously optimistic for both of these albums, and both of them have, I think, really lived up to all the hype. So at number 6, I really could have had 2 albums, but I separated the 2 albums, even though they probably really shouldn't have been. But at number 6, I've got Return of the Dream Canteen by Red Hot Chili Peppers. Of course, the other album I was talking about was Unlimited Love, which I had in my honorable mentions. So the way this kind of worked out was Red Hot Chili Peppers, when they went to the studio to record their album, they had enough material, they were going to do a double album. And then style-wise, they're like looking at the 2 different halves, and they're like, well, style-wise, one is very different from the other one. So that's why they released half of it as Unlimited Love, the other half as Return of the Dream Canteen. So this came out October 14th. And this album, I think, is it's more reminiscent of older Red Hot Chili Peppers. It definitely has more funk-sounding songs, a lot of funk soul to it. Some great bass playing by Flea on here. Whereas Unlimited Love was, I think, more of a kind of traditional kind of rock album. So that's why I said sound-wise, I think they're very different. Of the 2, I think Return of the Dream Canteen, like I said, is much more reminiscent of that like early to mid-90s, even like late 80s to mid-90s Red Hot Chili Pepper sound. And number 5 is an album that we talked about in the Sunday video. Ian had it in his top 3. I thought it was a great album. I couldn't quite get it into my top 3, though. That album is Patient Number 9 by Ozzy Osbourne. You know, the last couple of Ozzy albums have been really fantastic. You know, Black Rain and Ordinary Man, I thought were 2 of the best albums that he's done since probably No More Tears. I wasn't a huge fan of Scream, so I kind of leave that one out. But Patient Number 9 is a great album. I think it's right in the same line with Ordinary Man. Almost, I don't want to call them sister albums, but they're very, style-wise, very similar. I think the only knock I can give Patient Number 9 is, even though he uses a bunch of great guitarists on here, the styles of those guitarists, because they are so differing, there's some disjointedness between the tracks, but overall I think it is a great album. And number 4 is a release that really, to be honest, it was released back in September. I think it was September 2nd when this album came out. And I'd say there for a while it probably was in my top 3, but because of the strength of some other releases, pushed it back to number 4. But it is a great album in its own right, but it is the self-titled release by Youngblood. It's a great album. If you go back and listen to his previous album, which is called Weird, I think it was released late 2019. Maybe it was beginning part of 2020, but it's absolutely fantastic album. Weird is probably, at least in my opinion, one of the best punk rock albums of the last probably 6 to 8 years. Just a really great album from beginning to end. There's maybe 1 or 2 tracks I can kind of skip over on there. So I was really anticipating this release. I was really looking forward to it. And then when this album kind of came out, I think it actually took a little bit for me to really get into it, because it is a very different album than Weird, where Weird is definitely a more straightforward kind of punk rock album. With a self-titled release, there's definitely a little more pop vibe to it. There's definitely some, kind of like hip-hop beats and things like that he tries to work into a sound. It's a fantastic album, though, and I will say that since this album came out, it's probably one of my most listened to albums. So it gets me down to the top three. If you watch the Sunday video, you know my top three are. And number three is an album that I was also looking forward to, and I think for the most part it's lived up to its hype. That album is Mainstream Sellout by Machine Gun Kelly. I know a lot of people love hating on Machine Gun Kelly, but this is a fantastic album. Is it as good as Tickets to My Downfall? Probably not, but it's probably it's one that when it first came out, I think I did a whole video on it. I think I gave it like a 6 out of 10. It's definitely grown on me since then, obviously, because I've got it at number 3 for the year. And that's because I think when it came out, I really wanted another Tickets to My Downfall. And when he released this, it's definitely more of a rap vibe. It has more rap influence on this album. And, it took me a little while to get into some of the tracks, but overall, it is a great album, and it's one that I'm interested to see him kind of continue on. I know he said his next album is going to be a rap album, but Machine Gun Kelly is one of those artists that, even though he has kind of changed genres and kind of gone back and forth, from the very beginning, he's had a lot of rock influence in his music, especially if you go back and listen to Hotel Diablo, which there are, even though it is a rap album and he's rapping over all those tracks on there, there's a lot of like straightforward rock songs that are on there that he's rapping over. So, like I said, he's had that rock influence. So it's really not that surprising to me to see him go from rap to rock back to rap with it, like I said, with that next album. But it's one that I definitely listen to over and over again, and I absolutely love this album. So at number 2 is probably my most surprising album of the year to me. It's a lot like, when I look at this album, it's a lot like I look at Lizzo. I wouldn't see myself listening to or liking any of the stuff from this artist previously, but I was really blown away by this album. And that album is Holy Fuck by Demi Lovato. And, even though Demi has had a lot of rock influences throughout her music, her first 2 albums were very much straightforward, like pop rock kind of albums. She after those first 2 albums, she definitely went off and did the very pop kind of stuff. And I've really had no interest in any of the stuff she's done throughout her career. And then on a whim, I streamed this album. This came out back August 19th, so it's probably like very beginning part of September when I finally got around to streaming the album. And right away, I was highly impressed with it. I bought it on CD. I bought the vinyl, and it's just a great album from beginning to end. If you're a fan of the Pretty Reckless, I think this is very reminiscent of some of the stuff that Pretty Reckless has done. Even though what the Pretty Reckless is doing is probably a little bit better than what this album is, this is a great, great rock album. I think one of the big things that separates this album from, say, some of the stuff like what Machine Gun Kelly's doing, or what Machine Gun Kelly has done on his last couple of albums, is as much as I like Mainstream Sellout, as much as I like Tickets to My Downfall, a lot of those tracks have the same kind of feel to a lot of them. They were very reminiscent of each other, I will say, even though that's not necessarily a bad thing. This album, what Demi did, each individual track stands on its own, and is in it. A lot of them have their own very unique sound that kind of blend together and make this great album. And then finally, my number 1 album of 2022. It's a great album. And same thing with Demi Lovato and Lizzo and some of the other stuff I've talked about today. I never really kind of saw myself getting into this album. I kind of have casually listened to some of the stuff that this band has put out before, but I'm not a metal guy at all. I think that probably the most metal that I'm going to get is Metallica. I think it's probably as far as into that genre as I would go. But I was really impressed with this album. My number 1 album is Impera by Ghost. Hands down my number 1 album. I was really impressed with this. And, this came out back on March 11th. It was probably, A couple of weeks after it came out, I got a text from Ian. He was like, "Hey man, you've got to check this album out. I know you're not a Ghost fan. I know you're not a metal guy, but you're gonna love a lot of these tracks." And he was absolutely right. Since I finally picked up this album, it's probably like a couple of weeks after it was released. It's been one of my most listened to albums of this year. I've got it on CD. I listen to it in my car. Will I kind of continue on and be a fan of them? I don't know. We'll have to see what they do with their next album. But as far as like comparing to this to their older stuff, I think this is a little bit more kind of like mainstream kind of metal. It's something that maybe a lot more people can kind of get their teeth into. But like I said, it's a great album and one I've really enjoyed. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what some of your favorite albums of the year are because, like I said, 2022 was an absolutely fantastic year for music. A lot of great stuff. Like I said, I had a top 10. I had 10 honorable mentions also. I really could have went, 10 more I probably could have done also. Just a great year overall in so many different genres. I'm hoping 2023 is going to be the same way. I'm sure it will be. There are a lot of great albums I'm looking forward to this year, but let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And that's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.